scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill. We know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. Over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. 2 separate Israeli airstrikes killed 26 Palestinians in Gaza City. This comes as Israel says it is now ready to resume ceasefire talks for a hostage release deal. China begins war games as its naval ships encircle Taiwan. Beijing says the drills are a message to the island after President William Lai was sworn in on May 20th. Norway to close its border for Russian tourists over the war in Ukraine. This year, over 5,000 Russians entered Norway, which was their last direct access to Europe's border-free Schengen area. A tornado in Iowa kills at least 5 and leaves 35 injured as the twister destroyed homes and cars. Several Midwestern states in the U.S. are witnessing a historic tornado season. And in Britain, 60 Nigerian students have been blocked from studying and asked to leave the country for failing to pay university fees. This after the West African nation's currency plummeted, wiping out their entire savings. We begin in the Middle East. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dismissed accusations of starving Palestinians to death in Gaza. Speaking to American media, Netanyahu said that the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant against him was based on a pack of lies. He added that the World Court was creating false symmetries between a democratically elected government and Hamas. The International Criminal Court's prosecutor has sought an arrest warrant for Israel's Prime Minister and Defense Minister while accusing them of starvation as a weapon of war. Now, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the charges are outrageous and that the World Court prosecutor was acting like a rogue agent. The Israeli Prime Minister says that he has in fact allowed entry of 500,000 tons of humanitarian aid into Gaza. And now the Israeli leader has dragged its biggest ally, the United States, into its disagreement with the World Court. Netanyahu said that he was not using starvation as a weapon of war, claiming that the United States had more malnutrition-related deaths when compared to Gaza. He said, quote, "There are 23 or 30 cases of malnutrition in a population of 2 million. The United States in 2022 had 20,000 deaths of malnutrition. That's 3 times more than in Gaza," end quote. Now, despite what appeared to be an attack, Netanyahu did thank the White House for calling out the ICC for demanding arrest warrants against the Israeli leadership. Meanwhile, as the Israeli Prime Minister battles it out with the International Criminal Court, a bigger diplomatic challenge has him cornered as more nations agree to recognize Palestine as an independent state. Just yesterday, Norway, Ireland, and Spain announced their support for Palestine, and now Colombia will open its embassy in Palestine. Now, in response, Israel has recalled its ambassadors from these countries, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also accused them of rewarding terrorism.
The intention of several European countries to recognize a Palestinian state is a reward for terrorism. 80% of the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria support the terrible massacre of October 7th. This evil cannot be given a state. This would be a terrorist state. It will try to repeat the massacre of October 7th again and again. We will not consent to this. Rewarding terrorism will not bring peace, and neither will it stop us from defeating Hamas.
With international pressure mounting on Netanyahu and thousands rallying at home calling for him to step down, the Prime Minister's days in office look to be numbered. Staying in the Middle East, families of female Israeli soldiers captured by Hamas on October 7th have released graphic footage of the abduction. The video shows the women lined up with their faces and bodies covered in bruises and blood. The families say this is an attempt to put pressure on Netanyahu to negotiate a hostage release deal with Hamas. Members of Israel's war cabinet say the gruesome clip made their stomachs churn. Yet a hostage release deal is nowhere in sight. Our next report brings you the plight of Israeli families whose loved ones continue to be held captive by Hamas.
يا كلاب والله لا ندعس
Someone speak English.
ولك اخواتنا ماتوا من وراك وانا لا بسكت.
That's what you mean?
What?
Where from? No.
What you just saw was a graphic video of Israeli women soldiers being taken hostage by Hamas on the 7th of October. The video shows the women lined up against the wall, with their hands, feet and face bloodied and bruised. The disturbing 3-minute-long visual was released by families of the Israeli women who've been taken hostage. The families say they are desperate to get their loved ones back. And the video is meant to put pressure on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do more for securing a hostage release deal. The original footage was first released by Hamas. The 13-minute-long video has now been cut short and reshared by Israeli families. Families say they have taken out the most gruesome scenes. In the chilling video, Hamas fighters threaten the women with death. Some Hamas fighters are seen leering at the women, calling them cheap and beautiful. The video also shows Hamas fighters loading the women into vehicles before taking them into Gaza. Out of the 7 women, 1 has been rescued and 1 has been found dead, while the remaining 5 are still in captivity. After seeing the video, a mother of an Israeli soldier says she was terrified for her daughter's safety.
Of course, it's something that it's one of my biggest fears, that, as a young woman, to be there in their monsters' hands. You don't know what they're capable of, and it's something that's very frightened.
Other family members of the Israeli women soldiers say they couldn't sit through the gruesome footage.
I saw the video for the first time. I cried while watching it, and towards the end I felt like I was going to throw up. I think any person who watches this video will understand that feeling, especially as a woman.
After the video was released by family members, there was a massive uproar in Israel. Protesters rallied in the thousands against Netanyahu. They accused the government of not wanting to secure a hostage release deal.
Actually, we're sick of those demonstrations. We want our beloved back home, but we have no choice to demonstrate. Even today, this video that was released of the women soldiers, how they were molested in the 7th of October, we had to use this weapon against our government, so they will see it.
Ministers of Israel's war cabinet say the video made their stomachs churn. Netanyahu himself called the video horrifying. Till now, more than 100 hostages have been released. However, at least 130 are still being held captive by Hamas. Efforts to reach a hostage release deal have failed repeatedly, and the Israeli families are hoping that this video will put more pressure on Netanyahu to negotiate a hostage release deal with Hamas and end the suffering of their children taken hostage.
And now here in the United States, former President Donald Trump has made some serious allegations against President Joe Biden. Shocker. On social media and in fundraising email, Donald Trump said that President Biden wanted to have him assassinated. The Republicans' campaign email said, quote, "Joe Biden was locked and loaded, ready to take me out and put my family in danger," end quote. On social media, Donald Trump made the outlandish claims that President Biden authorized the Federal Bureau of Investigation to use deadly lethal force against the former president. Donald Trump was referencing the search warrant order executed in August of 2022 when federal agents raided his Mar-a-Lago estate in search of classified documents which Trump had refused to turn over to the government. Now, Donald Trump's claims were in response to court filings which clearly included standard FBI wording stating that agents were allowed to use deadly force if someone was in imminent danger. However, it did not take long for the former president to distort the statement to say that the Department of Justice was ready to shoot him. The strange remarks add to the pile of false claims made by Donald Trump against President Joe Biden. The Republican Party's presumptive presidential candidate has also falsely accused President Biden of carrying out a political witch hunt. Donald Trump often calls the commander-in-chief Crooked Biden, knowing that the executive office plays no part in managing the judiciary.
The White House is the person or the group, whatever. They're the one trying this case. You heard who was doing all the talking. Representative from the White House. Just recently. This is all about Biden can't campaign, so he's trying to injure his opponent. They're trying to hurt the opponent because they can't win it fair and square.
Donald Trump has even accused President Biden of interfering in the Republicans' electoral campaign.
They're doing it in 2024 just like they did in 2020. Can you imagine with all of the wrongdoing that we found and that you know existed, they're coming after me for election interference? That's the classic of all.
Now, the ex-president is known to often bend the truth and make outlandish claims. In fact, after becoming president in 2017, he stunned reporters when he accused former President Barack Obama of spying on his presidential campaign. But accusing a sitting president of wanting to assassinate a former president, especially in this politically charged environment, is definitely taking things too far, even for Donald Trump. And in Mexico, 10 bodies were found scattered across the beach town of Acapulco. In separate incidents, 6 people were strangled with their hands tied behind their backs, while 4 victims were shot dead. Now, media reports have linked these killings to organized crime syndicates. In fact, Mexico's drug cartels are infamous for killing their victims either by strangling them or by gunning them down. Acapulco was once a glamorous tourist spot. In fact, many A-list celebrities had homes in the seaside town before it was overrun by drug gangs. Last year, disputes between cartels led to almost 2,000 murders in the area alone. And while cartel violence is nothing new to Mexico, bloodshed in the country has spiked ahead of the country's general election, which is scheduled for June 2nd. Gangs have even started using sophisticated methods like bomb-dropping drones and improvised explosive devices to instill fear among the electorate. Government data shows April marked the most lethal month in Mexico this year, as the drug cartels see the election as an opportunity to seize more power. Reports say they've murdered more than 100 people in politically motivated killings, including around 20 political candidates since January. Now, this has put both politicians and civilians at risk across the entire country.
Cuando suena mi teléfono, When my phone rings, I'm terrified that it'll be the school saying something has happened to my kids. Whenever the phone rings, I'm always afraid it's bad news.
Mexicans say they are disappointed in President Andrés Manuel López Obrador over his handling of gang violence.
I don't know why my government, my president, doesn't come down with a heavier hand against these cartels. I feel disappointed. I expected more.
Now, despite disbanding a corrupt federal police and replacing it with 130,000 strong National Guards, Obrador's government has failed to stop drug cartels from running rampant. And the two candidates vying to be Mexico's next president have not offered any concrete proposals to tackle the cartels either. It's also worth noting that Mexico will choose between two women presidential candidates, a first in the country's history. Now, as the battle between the government and drug cartels continues, innocent Mexicans are caught in the crossfire. And finally, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has announced the date for the United Kingdom's next general election. Voters will cast their ballots on the 4th of July to elect 650 parliamentarians. The surprise announcement has come early as the election was expected to be held after September. Now, opinion polls show the Conservative Party, which has been ruling for 14 years, could lose to the opposition Labour Party. The economy and immigration remain the core electoral issues for the voters. Our final report explains what's at stake for Britain in this election.
And we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has locked the date for the United Kingdom's next general election. Britons will cast their votes on the 4th of July. The surprise announcement ended months of speculation as to when Sunak will call a new vote.
Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
The 44-year-old Prime Minister said the British Parliament will be suspended and will be formally shut down next week. Following this, a 5-week election campaign will begin. The high-stakes gamble has come early, as the election was expected to be held after September this year. This would have given Sunak at least 2 years in office. He took over as the UK's Prime Minister in October 2022.
I hope that my work since I became Prime Minister shows that we have a plan and are prepared to take bold action necessary for our country to flourish. Now, I've stuck with that plan and always been honest with you about what is needed, even when that's been difficult. Because I'm guided by doing what is right for our country, not what is easy.
Now, Conservatives have been in power in Britain for 14 years, but this time they are widely expected to lose to the opposition Labour Party. Leading the way is Keir Starmer, the main opponent of Sunak, who could potentially become the country's next Prime Minister if his party wins the election.
But no matter what else is said and done, that opportunity for change is what this election is about. Over the course of the last 4 years, we've changed the Labour Party, returned it once more to the service of working people. All we ask now, humbly, is to do exactly the same for our country and return Britain to the service of working people.
Reports say Sunak's announcement was met with alarm by his party's senior leaders, who are concerned that their party could face an electoral wipeout. Pre-election polls suggest that Britons prefer Starmer over Sunak, with over 70% people having a negative view of the current Prime Minister. Starmer is not too popular either, but remains a favourable choice. Polls show that the economy continues to be the core issue for voters, with younger generations being concerned about the rising cost of living in Britain.
The Conservatives came into power when I was 9 years old, and since then the chances for me or my friends to even think of affording a house have completely evaporated, or the chances of us to afford to have a family have completely evaporated, and now finally feels like the first time where change is possible and we can start to turn the tide on that, which I think is vitally important that we make that happen.
Official data shows that Sunak's government has managed to bring down the inflation rate to its lowest level in almost 3 years. And the Prime Minister is looking to frame his campaign around the narrative of economic recovery. But the Labour Party has frequently attacked Sunak, saying the country needs more economic stability. Another electoral issue that Sunak faces is immigration and his controversial Rwanda deal, where he seeks to send Britain's illegal migrants on a one-way flight to the African nation. Sunak says the first flight will take off in July. However, the Labour Party says it will withdraw Sunak's scheme as soon as it wins a majority in the parliament. Now, the election for 650 parliamentary seats will be the first time Sunak faces the public while in charge. The UK's last election was held in 2019, where former Prime Minister Boris Johnson won an 80-seat majority as he fought to get his Brexit deal through Parliament. Soon after, British politics faced an extremely volatile period. Johnson was forced to resign over a series of scandals. His successor, Liz Truss, lasted just over 40 days on the job before she quit over controversial tax and spending plans, paving the way for Sunak to become Britain's first Indian origin Prime Minister.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.